How many times, for one incident after another, have I said, Trump is coming?
Huh?
He's coming. I'm going to say it on national television again.
Stephen A. Smith, the sports commentator, suggested that this was revenge from the president for all the kind of left-wing activism of the NBA. Your response to that, 15 seconds.
I'm the FBI director. I decide which arrests to conduct and which not to conduct. That may be the single dumbest thing I've ever heard out of anyone in modern history, and I live most of my time in Washington, D.C.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of The New World. Now, apologies for the wait. For some of you who have been a long time watcher, we are in college, so bear with us. But in today's video, after news that hit the basketball world during the first week of the 2025-26 NBA season, we discussed the shocking gambling scandal going on around the league that, as of this morning, current NBA player of the Miami Heat, Terry Rozier, was arrested. Former NBA player and now head coach of the Portland Trail Blazers, Chauncey Billups, and former NBA player Damon Jones were all taken into custody today by the FBI. Now, we will get into more details throughout the video, but this gambling operation is allegedly linked to the Italian Mafia, as well as Rozier, who purposely rigged NBA games by giving information to a group of bettors who bet on his unders and delivered a share of the winnings to Rozier's doorstep. So, as you can see, this is big news and it's time to discuss it. But before we get into the video, make sure to hit that subscribe button if you haven't, turn on those notifications to stay tuned for more content, and leave your thoughts on the situation in the comments. Now, with that being said, fellas, what are your thoughts on this illegal gambling/sports betting operation that allegedly has gone on for 11 years, according to the FBI?
Man, I have a lot of thoughts about the situation, but of course, I'm going to take it from a little bit of a different approach. I think one of the most interesting things about this issue is the media's takeaway about it. A lot of focus has been on the FBI investigation element of it, and more so in the weeds of the details behind what happened. I don't really care about what happened, the specificities, especially when it comes to Chauncey Billups' situation and the mafia being involved. I feel like that's a completely different element of this conversation, because really what we want to talk about is the sports betting, because the overall question of this environment is it a problem for not even just the NBA, but other leagues like the NFL? In my opinion, the industry of sports betting is not a problem. When you have a multi-billion-dollar industry, there are going to be issues. But I think what the biggest problem is the culture within the NBA, as well as with other professional athletics. So just to give a little bit of breakdown, because I think what's really important to understand is that sports betting has just been legalized relatively recently, as of 2018. In 1992, the Professional and Amateur Sports Protection Act was enacted. This basically prohibited all sports betting. So not until 2018, when we have Murphy versus NCAA, did New Jersey challenge PASPA in federal court after passing a law to legalize and regulate sports betting at casinos and racetracks. This case went all the way up to the Supreme Court, where the Supreme Court ruled that those key provisions in that initial act in 1992 were unconstitutional as it applied to states. Since 2018, now we have legalized betting for sports, but this is not something that's nationwide. I think as of now, 2025, we have about 38 states that have legalized sports betting. So this is a very, very decentralized and deregulated environment. We look at the NBA. In 2018, the NBA immediately got involved by providing their own real-time data to U.S. sports books. Then, 2023, the CBA incorporated very strict parameters surrounding betting. And what I want to talk about is, what is the policy? What is the NBA policy when we talk about betting? NBA policy is that players have limited endorsing with betting companies. So that's basically saying that player having stock, having investment within one of these organizations, it's very, very limited. They can, but there are very strict regulations on what they cannot and cannot do in terms of investing their money into a betting business. But betting on NBA events, and I want to make sure I'm saying this loud and clear, betting on NBA events by players, coaches, and or referees is prohibited. It's prohibited. That means what? Players, coaches, you cannot do it. Under any circumstances, you cannot bet on any games. And that's not even just limited to the NBA. That's also when it talks about G League, WNBA, anything under the NBA parent holding company, you cannot bet on. Those are just the facts. So when we have these incidents, like we have, the Jonte Porter situation. Now we have the, arrest of Chauncey Billups and Terry Rozier and former coach Damon Jones. Let's get to the root cause of this situation. The root cause, in my humble opinion, is that we're not paying proper attention to what's actually happening. Like, you have many media members that went on, ESPN today talking about politics, and I don't really understand what any of that has to do with anything. In my opinion, the ideal of NBA players engaging in gambling related misconduct is the equivalent to a corporate level employee of a publicly traded company engaging in insider trading. It's essentially the same thing. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a discussion about fraud. It's not a political discussion. It's not a conspiracy. It's really not even controversial from the typical mainstream sports media standpoint. And that's why we're not really talking about what the true issue is. So before we get into the fraud element, I think that we need to incorporate something that's called a fraud triangle, which is really establishing why this is a problem. Fraud triangle is going to encompass of three main things, that being pressure, opportunity, and rationalization. Because in order to say that something is fraudulent, there has to be deceit and there has to be intent. So what are the pressures? Basically, what are the incentives to commit fraud for an NBA player? Because when we talk about all of these incidents, we're not talking about the superstar players. We're not talking about the LeBrons of the world or the Stephs, or we're not even talking about guys that are solidified in their careers. Like, I throw out like an Alex Caruso or somebody of that mode, an established veteran that is making a ton of money. Pressures, financial stress. Look at a lot of these guys. A lot of these guys are bums. They're either, guys on two-way contracts, or they're going to be out of the league. So they may have a lot of personal debt, family obligation. A lot of these athletes, they basically become the breadwinner of the home, of their entire families. They're not even just, paying to make sure that their kids are good, but they're paying for making sure their parents are good, cousins, aunts, uncles, everybody. That's not even encompassing how much money they're spending on homes and cars and women and jewelry and all this extra excess. So a lot of guys end up becoming in debt. Performance, contract pressures. A lot of guys have a fear of being traded or being cut. So they need another source of revenue to basically maintain stability and keep up with that lifestyle. Then you also have a lower degree external pressures like sponsorships, public images, all those different types of things. Essentially, like I said, we're not hearing about superstars being involved in this. It's because there's no financial pressure for these players to be involved because the risk is not worth it. It really isn't. Why would a guy like LeBron James that's making, I think I saw a report he's making over $100 million a year. Why would he get involved in pennies, essentially? These guys is, putting up bets for 100,000 or, maybe a few thousand. It doesn't make any sense. There's no risk there. So we're not worried about those guys. We're worried about the guys at the bottom of the totem pole. Opportunity. And this, in my opinion, is a really big thing that we need to talk about. These players have access to all sorts of information. They have access to the games, the teams, the decision makers that can create chances to misuse information or influence the outcome on things. What do we hear about with the Chauncey Billups and Damon Jones? They basically were providing information about who was going to be available to play. Like, oh, LeBron, he's not going to play tonight. Like, they have access to that information. That creates a disadvantage for other people that are betting. Like, somebody like me doesn't know if LeBron James is going to play or not unless I see it on the injury report. So we have opportunity. Now, last, rationalization, which is basically reframing the act as acceptable or not fraudulent. Basically justification of, okay, what I'm doing is not that bad. NBA is making a ton of money. NBA has incorporated all of this gambling. Us players are the only ones that are prohibited. Why can't we do it? We're the ones that are, facilitating to this money being made. Everybody's allowed to bet. Why can't we get a piece of that pie? So essentially, these players are going to be justifying why they can do it. So once again, these incidents are a core example of why we continue to harbor the point that these NBA players, along with other professional athletes, along with other celebrities, are mere entitled babies. They think that just because they are athletes and generate a ton of revenue, that they can essentially get away with insider trading without repercussions of their actions. One of my biggest questions when I'm hearing all of this dialogue is, what is really the difference between an NBA player being involved in sports gambling activities and a corporate employee trading during a blackout period, where they're utilizing insider information or privileged access to benefit from trades, which we all know is illegal and disallowed? In this context, sports betting is basically equivalent to the stock market. NBA has privileged access to information such as, even medical reporting, minute restriction of players, and team strategic implementations that normal bettors simply do not have. That's really like my biggest takeaway. My biggest takeaway is, why aren't we looking at this like insider trading? We have to remember what the NBA policy is, which basically means that under no circumstances should guys be betting on games. That's just a fact. So, in my opinion, Adam Silver, you need to kind of consider these risks. All these incidents may come across as isolated, but it's really hurting and affecting the integrity of the game. People have always thought that the NBA was rigged. That's how people are, thinking that sports is rigged. But now with these incidents, it's going to damage the public trust from the fans. Because the fans are going to look at it like, these guys are shaving points or, not playing or compromising the game. And what are other people doing? Is this just a part of the culture? Reputational damage. We know that the NBA has this, this $1 billion media rights deal. Is this going to start having an impact on things like that because the reputation is taking a hit? And then now we got the FBI getting involved. So that's criminal and legal exposure. So these are some big risks that need to be taken seriously with all of these incidents that are happening. I think that they're going to happen with more regularity. Now, in terms of some controls that need to be put in place, basically controls meaning safeguards, NBA, they got to tighten up on those conflict of interest boundaries. Because if we want to just take a look at what the NBA policy states in terms of ramifications that happen with this, any player who directly or indirectly wagers money or anything of value on the outcome of any game played by a team in the league is subject to discipline up and including expulsion, permanent disqualification at the commissioner's discretion. So basically that's saying that Adam Silver gets to decide what happens to a player if they're involved in any of these activities. In my opinion, that simply is not good enough. It is not good enough to basically say we're going to leave Adam to decide the fate of these players. No. We need to have documented in policy and procedure what are the ramifications and stipulations for guys being involved in these acts. So it can leave no room for interpretation, no room for rebuttal. When a player decides to commit that act, they already know what the consequences are going to be for those actions. In my opinion, that's what needs to be in play. I can add some additional safeguards and controls, but I'm going to kick it off to my boys because we can go on for hours and hours on this dialogue about what the NBA needs to do better. They're doing some things well. We just saw, that this is opening week of the NBA season, and now they finally fixed the presentation, with NBC and Peacock, and I really was enjoying that. But there are some other things that they need to kind of get under wraps if they want to continue to carry the weight of all of this motion that they're getting, all of this acclaim that they're getting.
Yeah, man, this is clearly a huge problem, honestly. And I agree with what Bardo was saying. This is definitely going to leave a little negative notch on the NBA for now, because we're clearly seeing it in social media, because now we're seeing all these, accounts, and everybody is, jokingly going on and bringing up old tweets of players and coaches and all that. And they're like, oh, well, since Terry Rozier got in trouble and Chauncey Billups got in trouble, ain't no telling, man. These other guys, they probably rig stuff too. So now they're pulling receipts, and then now they're, jokingly, adding the FBI, and they're like, oh, we got another one. And then, we see Gilbert Arenas. We all know how he is. He's over there jokingly on his Gil's Arenas show. This man posted on Instagram, pulled up with a informant lunch or whatever, like trolling and stuff. And so it's like, this is definitely interesting as far as the sports betting thing. Out of all people, the fact that it's Terry Rozier, someone who's made a good amount of money, throughout the league, it's kind of like, why? Even for like the amount of money that he's making now towards, I guess you could say, the back end of his career, compared to the alleged amount of money that he was, getting at his doorstep for, telling those bettors, to bet the under. The amount was allegedly, $200,000, but Terry Rozier in his contract, he was already making more than that. So it's like, you over here trying to, take all this money and basically risk yourself getting in trouble, knowing the consequences. But I guess you think you big enough that, you won't get caught. clearly your actions, they got to you. And then, you know, we got this other thing going on with the mafia. I don't really know what's going on with that. Like, the mafia is crazy. And apparently, I mean, it's got to have a good amount of truth to it because there's been 4 years worth of video evidence. You know, we got Damon Jones out here bringing LeBron into it. And we know how, you know, folks get about LeBron. So we know the black SUVs was probably pulled up. You know, once they found out this information, that LeBron's team is definitely finna get to work. But the Chauncey Billups thing, man, I don't really know. I don't know how much truth it is to it, you know, with him being in it. But they said they got video evidence. Man, ain't no telling, man. Like I said, it's just honestly a crazy situation that's going on. It's clearly been documented for a while now. As they said, this is going across 11 states. So this is clearly something big. You know, we already saw the Gilbert Arenas thing going on in the summer. So this is clearly something that continues to go on. They've been saying that with the whole mafia thing that NBA players were kind of forced into it against their will, against the mafia. I don't really know how much truth that is to that. So I'm just ready to see what more information the FBI gives out because this is crazy. The sports betting thing is just disappointing to see that come from Terry Rozier. Like Jontay Porter, that's understandable. Like he probably wasn't gonna last much in the league, so he was like, man, you know, I ain't gonna be in the league much longer. I might as well just, you know, get a little bread on the side, even if, you know, I am risking myself. I might as well just F it, we ball. Go try it out. So that's understandable coming from like a 12th man, a 13th man, but a known role player. Like, come on, bro. What are we doing, man?